I'm going to sit down. Y'all will pray for me. They told me that I have psoriatic arthritis, and a lot of times it gets in it's always in my joints and inflammation and stuff like that. So if y'all will just pray for me. I know the Lord is a healer. And we don't have to suffer because he is wonderful to his children. So I'm going to sit down with y'all tonight. So been thinking a lot about, and the Lord's really been talking to me about running our race. You know, the Lord gives us a race to run. And a lot of times we try to get other people to run it for us, or try to run other people's for them, or, but the Lord gives us each a race to run. And my scripture tonight comes from Hebrews 12:1. And it says, "So since we stand surrounded by all those who have gone before, an enormous cloud of witnesses, let us drop every extra weight, every sin that clings to us and slackens our pace, and let us run with endurance the long race set before us." That don't sound like a great thing, right? Running a long race. I don't want to run a long race. But that's what the Lord has set before us. And when we accept Jesus into our life as our Savior, then we start on our race. And he's got something for each and every one of us to do in this life. We never know, even if it may just be being an encouragement to someone. I used to know this lady. She passed away several years ago, but she always wanted to do something in the church. She went to church she was raised in church and all that. She always wanted to do something. Well, she wasn't a singer. She wasn't really a speaker. She was a really good giver, but she was a super encourager. And, she always thought that she wasn't doing anything because she didn't have a microphone, or, wasn't on the stage or whatever. But she always was anytime anybody walked in the door, she was an encouragement to them. She just was a happy person, and she just encouraged everybody she came in contact with. And that was her ministry, really. That was her race, as she was running her race. And a lot of times we think that we're not doing anything, or that we don't have a purpose or whatever, but Hebrews says that God has set a race before us. And so our race is our Christian life. And it's a long race, so that means it's a marathon, not a sprint. We want to run them quick races, right? Hurry up and get there. I want what I want when I want it, and I want it right now. But he said that we have to run with endurance the long race set before us. So our race is a marathon, and we're called to stay on the course and remain faithful to the end. Even Paul in 2 Timothy 4:7, Paul used that same imagery near the end of his life. He said, "I've fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I've kept the faith." So it's not just one time that the Bible talks about this race that we're on. So a marathon is a strenuous test of fitness and endurance. We all see the little 50-yard dash. In school we had the 50-yard dash and the 100-yard dash and the little quick races that we had to do in PE and stuff. Or we did when I was in school anyway. And then we watch these marathons on TV, Boston Marathon and all these other marathons where they run miles and do all these things. So it's very strenuous, and it's very long, and it puts you to a test, and it puts you to a different test. But our job, if you want to call it that, is to finish our race. And the good thing is that he made you to win the race that he has for you. So he made you to win that race. That's why we can't run somebody else's and somebody else can't run ours, because he made us for the purpose of the race he has before us. So the first part of verse 1 says, "Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." So our race or our purpose in life is what God set before us. To run this race means that first we have to acknowledge that God's purpose for our life is what matters. And we have to make it our number one priority to discover and complete that purpose. And like I said, like I was talking about the lady that I used to go to church with, she didn't really feel like she had one because she wasn't doing something. But sometimes it's just being there for someone, or God gives us all gifts that we can use. We have to find out what that is and make it a number one priority to complete that purpose. In the Old Testament, it talks about that's cited in this chapter. He talks about the cloud of witnesses. Those are the people that have gone before us, the cloud of witnesses. We're called by God to play a unique role in His purpose for human history. We don't know. One day, I bet, in the Old Testament, David probably, he was taking care of the sheep. He probably didn't think nothing about being king or killing Goliath or none of that stuff when he was growing up. So we never know. And a lot of the others, with all the people that are mentioned in the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they were all, if you read the stories, they were all just people. David was a little shepherd boy that had a bunch of brothers that was probably mean to him. He stayed out in the field. But God had a purpose for his life, was to be king. And it started when he was born, of course, but he followed, he was obedient and listened to God and did what God said. So even in the little things, even in caring for the sheep, God used that to prepare him for later on, because he talked about killing a lion and a bear, right? Was it a lion and a bear? Yeah, with his bare hands. So that prepared him, gave him confidence that he could do things, showed him that the Lord was with him. And just taking care of those sheep prepared him to be a faithful servant. So all the things that we don't really think about in our life prepare us. And then he was king. And his name, everybody knows who King David was. So you never know. Somebody later on, your name might be famous. Never know. Because God has a purpose for each of us. So, and it may just be famous in one person's life. Our children. Our name can live on through them if we follow the Lord and do what the Lord has for us and run our race. Our legacy that we leave behind can be great, even if it's not King David. But so we're called by God to play a unique role in His purpose for human history. We talk a lot here about the kingdom and building the kingdom and all that, and the pastor said Sunday we all have a part of, we're all a part of the church. You might be a knee or a big toe, but if you don't have your big toe, you're off balance a little bit, right? So we all have a part to play. Of course, we're not eligible to run a race until we enter it, right? If you can't run if you don't enter. So likewise with the race that God has set before us, we can't run God's race until we've entered it. So, and the bad news is that none of us qualifies for this race by our own performance. We're all disqualified, really, because we're all born into a sinful nature and sinful man. But the good news is that God says that God has already paid our entrance fee for us because He sent His Son to die for us so that we could join Him in this race that He has for us. So now it's not one of eligibility because Jesus made us eligible, right? But now the issue is willingness. Are we willing to receive God's forgiveness through Christ and enter this race that we have, that He has set before us? And that's how we enter the race. We accept Christ, and then we get on the path he has for us. Proverbs says he orders our steps. He don't take them for us, but he orders them. So that's our path. That's our race. He orders our steps. So the first thing is we have to accept Jesus and get on the race course. Have to enter the race. So that's something I want you to be thinking. Of course, y'all are all regulars here, so but I want you to be thinking about, am I willing to run this race that God has set before me? Because after we receive Christ, that's the most important issue is running. We got to start running the race, right? Can you say that your number one priority is now to discover and complete God's purpose for your life? That's a tall order. Is that my number one purpose? To figure out what God's got for me and to do it? Should be. Sometimes it's hard though, right? It's hard because we have all the other stuff going on. Work, bills, family, car tears up, refrigerator tears up, whatever's going on. So, but we have to always remember that our number one priority is to complete God's purpose for our life. Because unlike entering the race, which we have to do one time, you only enter once, we have to run. We have to continue to choose day after day to continue running and continue to stay on the path that God has for us. So the second point is this race requires endurance. That's another reason it's hard to run the race, right? It gets hard sometimes. And we have to keep doing it and keep going and keep going and keep going. And what's going on, God? Why am I not up there? And why am I behind all these people? We have all these things come through our mind. But we have to continue every day to choose to run the race. It's not, again, like I said, we get that impatient sometimes where we want it right now. Lord, just bless me. Why ain't you blessing me? I've been praying for a week and a half. Why ain't I got it? Right? We get that way. I get that way. I'll hold my hand up. I won't say we, I'll say me. Right? Y'all might not get that way. I get impatient sometimes. Lord's working on me. I have to sing that song every day. He's still working on me. The little kid song. But we have to, and like I said, we have to choose. Okay, God, when we get off of that path a little bit, we have to say, oh, I got to get back over here. I've in my mind, before I look at my life and God's path for me like a road. And Jesus is walking on that road with me because he said he'll never leave me or forsake me. So when I started on in my marathon, Jesus started with me. And sometimes, looking back over my little road, my path, my race, I've been off in the ditch over here a few times, right? We get off in the ditch, in the weeds, take a detour through the woods sometimes because I try to do it my way, or try to not let the Lord order my steps, or not follow the steps that the Lord has ordered for me, right? So we have to get back on the road. And the good thing is, when I think about my road, when I've been off in the ditch or in the weeds, I can look back at my road and Jesus is still there. He's still there waiting for me to come back to the road, Tommy, get on up here. Sometimes he has to talk to me like that. Get back over here, girl. But thankfully, he's always there on my road waiting for me, right where we left off. I don't have to go back to the beginning and start over. He's right there waiting. Yes, thank the Lord. So we have to, we have to keep going. We have to endure. And that's what that scripture says. We have to run the race with endurance. So, and when we endure to the end, that means when Jesus comes or when we leave this earth, that's the end. So, maybe a long time. The path's not always level ground. Sometimes it leads through all kinds of hills and obstacles. And like I said, sometimes we get off in the ditch somewhere and have to get back up there and start again, start back where we left off and all that. But our race don't require us to hurry. It don't require us to go fast. Jesus is there with us and helps us each step of the way. So we don't have to go fast. We just have to endure. So sometimes when you feel like, why ain't this happening for me? Why am I not up here ahead of these guys? I've been doing this a long time. You know, we all have those thoughts. But we just have to remember, my job is not to finish first. My job is to finish. So something that's the key difference that I want to talk about just for a few minutes is between a sprinter and a marathon runner. There's a difference in a lot of things. How they train, what they eat. I was reading about it, and I was like, my goodness. Like, this one eats all carbs, this one eats no carbs. This one eats, runs fast, and this one works out and runs slow. And, so they train different. Their bodies are built different, a marathon runner and a sprinter. Because a sprinter wants to get there fast. And a marathon runner goes for the endurance. Everything they do is opposite. The distance they run is opposite. A sprinter runs 100 or 200 or 400 meters. A marathon runner runs miles. So we have to look at that when we're in the spirit world, I guess you could say, in our spiritual walk. We have to look at, what are we feeding ourselves? Are we feeding ourselves the word every day? Are we praying every day? Are we worshiping every day? Are we doing all the things that it takes to help us to endure? Or are we just throwing up those quick prayers? God, help me. I need this money to pay my bill. I need this. I need that. My car's about out of gas. Lord, help me get to the gas station. Are we throwing up those quick little prayers? Are we sprinting to get to an end or to a result? Or are we doing all the things that it takes to endure to the end, which is the final end? So we have to have perseverance or stick-to-itiveness. We have to refuse to quit. A marathon runner, I don't know if y'all have ever watched those marathons, but some of them fall out on the route, and they have to, but they get up and keep going. And, they've trained to pressure through and to press through all of that fatigue and all the pressure that they have. So endurance is the same as patience or long-suffering. We talk about the fruit of the Spirit, patience and long-suffering. And 4 times in Hebrews, verse 1, 2, 3, and 7, he talks about endurance. These patience or long-suffering or endurance is used over 70 times in the New Testament. We don't think about that a lot of times. We might miss it sometimes because we might be reading those quick little bless me verses or something for the sprint, right? But it's mentioned over 70 times, patience and long-suffering, in just the New Testament, because it's an important character quality for a Christian life. We have to have endurance. So just some points that I have why we don't run the race consistently and finish well. Because, like I said, I'll talk about me. I've got off the track before and not run the race that I was supposed to be running. And there's a few reasons that we do that we get off track, that we don't run consistently, or that we don't finish well. Number one is expectations. That goes back to that I want what I want it, and I want it right now, right? We all hear all the time that we have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That sounds great. And we do have those rights. I won't say that we don't. But we have to run our race with endurance. It's not something that's just handed to you and sprinkled on you or whatever. Another reason we don't run the race consistently is because we want to be in the spotlight, and we give up or stop when we're not. We all want to be on the stage. We want to do all the things that it takes, all the things to be seen or heard, because that's what we feel like is winning, right? We see that in our culture today. If you're famous or popular or whatever, you're winning, but that's not necessarily the way it is with the Lord. And so we don't want to do all the things it takes to get there. All the people on the stage, most of them, or a lot of them, I'll say a lot of them, have practiced, have sacrificed. We don't know what they've done or what they've paid to get to where they are, right? So number two, that we don't run the race consistently is because we don't want to do what it takes. It's hard. Practice and sacrifice. Consistency behind the scenes is hard. And then number three is there's too many obstacles. Things happen in life. We live in a sinful, fallen world, and things happen. So we have lots of obstacles come up, and that makes us not want to keep going sometimes. Makes us want to give up. What's the point? And the devil whispers in our ear, just go ahead. You ain't going to make it. Just give up. Or, other people we know. Well, you ain't never going to amount to anything. What are you trying for? This is you, what you were. But that's not what God says we are, right? So if we are doing what He has set for us, He has made us to win our race. I want you to always remember that. He made you to win your race. He made you that way. He calls you whatever it is that you need to be. He gives you whatever it is you need to have to win your race if we endure. And number 4, endurance is inconvenient. It's hard. It's inconvenient. So there's lots of things that reasons that we don't run consistently. And in Hebrews, when he's writing this to the people, a lot of them lack endurance. So he's telling them how to develop it. So we're going to look at a few ways to develop endurance. The first one, in verse 1, it says, lay aside all the extra baggage. Lay aside every weight that so easily besets us, I think the King James says. So imagine somebody showing up at the starting line to a marathon wearing basketball shoes that are untied, carrying a pair of suitcases, and a jacket and sweatpants, right? Ankle weights, yeah. They ain't going to be able to run very far, are they, with all that stuff, right? With the shoes untied and all that stuff. So you say, hey, you ain't going to be able to run with that. But they tell you, you don't understand, I need this stuff. All this stuff in my suitcases is stuff I need. Stuff I've learned that I have to carry with me. Maybe some negative things that don't help me anymore, right? It's stuff that we're familiar with or that we're comfortable with. We're comfortable in them old basketball shoes untied and sweatpants and T-shirt, and, So maybe feel better about wearing all this stuff and carrying all this stuff. It's my comfort. But he can say what he wants to, right? But when that race starts, he ain't going to get far, right? So he'll have to make a choice, and we have to make a choice. Do we get rid of that extra baggage? Do we get rid of all the stuff we're carrying around, or get out of the race? Do we tie up our shoes and get to running, let go of all that stuff? Because that's what the Bible says. Get rid of all the weights that hold us back. So what is obvious to us about running a marathon may not be obvious to us about running God's race sometimes. But most of us are carrying around significant excess baggage, right? I carry baggage sometimes. I have to remember, oh, put that down, Tommy. It ain't helping you, right? But then we wonder why it's so difficult to stay in the race. Why am I having such a hard time? Well, maybe I'm holding on to, maybe not necessarily anything bad. Maybe I'm holding on to some old mindset of it should be this way. Shoulds will get us every time. Shoulds will get us every time. So that's some baggage that we have to let go of. So the writer of Hebrews indicates two different kinds of excess baggage. The first one is the sin which so easily entangles us. And this can refer to sinful attitudes, practices, or habits we believe we can't do without, but are really depleting our energy and our endurance to pursue God. And then it all gets us tangled up in all these other weeds too, right? When you get in the weeds, you're in the weeds. You got to fight your way out sometimes. So sometimes those sinful attitudes or practices get us enmeshed in other sins before we realize it. So we have to set aside those sins that so easily entangle us. Verse 1, part of verse 1. And then the other part is every encumbrance. And this refers to things that maybe are not wrong in themselves, but we have to get rid of them. Because God showed us that, we may have a attachment to something that's not necessarily healthy for us. I know this preacher I heard one time, he got up and was preaching, and he said, "It's a sin to wear blue jeans." Everybody looked at him like, "What are you talking about? I wear blue jeans all the time." And he said, "It's a sin for me to wear blue jeans, because when I wear blue jeans, I think I look good." And he goes on telling this story, and God spoke to him, and he said, "God told me you can't wear blue jeans no more because you think you look too good, and it ain't helping you at all." So sometimes it's things that might not necessarily be bad. But, I know Pastor has talked about getting rid of movies and stuff that wasn't bad movies necessarily that he had, but the Lord spoke to him and said, you need to get rid of that. So that's the other part, the sin, but then the encumbrances, the weights. That's the weights. Things that the Lord speaks to us individually about getting rid of. And that preacher went on to say, you don't have to stop wearing blue jeans if the Lord don't tell you to. So if you wear blue jeans, you can wear blue jeans if the Lord don't tell you to stop wearing them. And I think I see him every now and then around, and I had never seen him in blue jeans either. So he's following the Lord. He got rid of that encumbrance, I guess. But sometimes if you're finding it difficult to stay in the race, the first thing you should check is what you're carrying. Okay, what baggage are we carrying with us? Is it possible you're asking God to give you more power to carry baggage when He's calling you to lay it down? When He's saying, let it go, don't wear them blue jeans, don't watch that movie, don't listen to that music, don't go to those places, let those relationships go that are holding you back? Are we saying, Lord, please help me, please help them, please help me help them? We're trying to run their race, trying to drag them along our race maybe, but it's holding us back. So we have to, when we find it difficult to stay in the race, the first thing, ask the Lord, Lord, is there something that I'm carrying that I don't need to carry? And He'll tell you if we listen. He tells us. Sometimes He tells us and we don't listen, but He's telling us anyway. And then we have to agree with Him and turn away from it. Take the practical steps to show that you're willing to move forward. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard getting rid of those relationships. Oh boy, old girl, always out. They're always there for me. Were they really? Or are they always there for you when you had something for them? And some people really were there for us, you know. But the Lord will show us who and what relationships to let go if we listen. So, you know, some of the old things, Lord, just help me to lay this down or to let this go. And it hurts sometimes, but we feel so much lighter and freer to run our race when we do it. The next step that we have to do is maintain proper mental focus. Verse 2 through 4, they're all kind of distractions that grab our focus, and they'll convince us to quit if we let them. Circumstances that we don't have control over. You know, we get bogged down and we don't have any control over consequences of our past behavior sometimes. We got to surrender to that process and let it happen, but we can still run our race through that. You know, we may not have any control over, you know, the court or the other people in our lives, what they're doing. But we can't say, well, look how rough my situation is. Poor, pitiful me. Look at all, if you had to put up with her, you'd be this way too. We can't say that kind of thing. We have to say, Lord, you are my helper. I can't control this situation. I don't have any control over these circumstances. So help me to make my way through it. Another thing that grabs our focus is contradictory feelings. Sometimes we get tired. Sometimes we feel defeated. I feel defeated. Sometimes I get tired. Sometimes I'm not motivated. Sometimes I don't want to wake up early on Sunday to come to church and be here all day and practice and go and do church and then prayer and then this and this. Sometimes it's tiring. And the Lord's okay with that. But I have to choose every day, Lord, I'm following you. I'm running my race. So I'm going to get up and come to church and do all the things that that I am called to do in my race. Because, you know, endurance is what he calls us to, is endurance. So sometimes we have to pray and we have to say, okay, Lord, help me change my feelings before I go to do this. Because I got to do it. I need to do it, whatever it is. So those feelings, the Lord will help us change our feelings. Lord, help me worship you today. Let me make it about you, not about me. Sometimes we have long-standing personal problems. We have heard all our life, you'll never amount to anything. You won't be able to do that. Why are you even trying? Or all the negative things that we've heard or told ourselves even over the years. Why even try? So that steals our focus. And we'll get to thinking, you know, how can I be useful to God? But he has set us all on a race, and he has made us to win. So we have to constantly grab our focus back from all these things. We look at other people, compare ourselves to others. That's another thing that grabs our focus and will convince us to quit if we let it. You know, why am I trying when they're way up there? Jonathan's only been saved for however long. I've been going to church my whole life. Why is he being blessed more than me? You know, we get those thoughts. So the Bible says we have to take those thoughts into captivity. We have to capture those thoughts and cast them out. And that's part of running our race with endurance. We have to, and the Lord is there to help us to do all these things. The Lord is there to help us to gather our focus back. We have to stay focused on him. So we have to choose, and it's a process. We have to learn to choose and maintain proper mental focus. So that involves identifying and turning away from the wrong thoughts. I'll never be enough. Why is he getting blessed and I'm not? All of those things. We have to identify and turn away from those. And then we have to develop a habit of focusing on Christ, right? So the Greek word for focusing on Christ, it means just that, looking away from everything else in order to concentrate on the proper object of our attention. So when we are looking at things, all the stuff in the world that's going on, all the stuff in our life that's going on, that's what's got our attention. We have to choose to turn away, turn our thoughts and focus on Jesus. So what does it mean to fix your eyes on Jesus? We've heard that statement before, fix your eyes on Jesus. Any idea what that means? No? So it don't mean just visualizing him, like getting a picture in your head. He is the author of our faith. So Jesus is an example of what it means to run with endurance. He's gone before us. He suffered. More suffering than we'll ever encounter, for sure. And he endured it. So when we are stuck in self-pity or consider, or what, in the ditch or whatever, we have to consider what he endured. So that's fixing our eyes on him. Looking at, okay, what did Jesus endure? How did he come through it? What did he tell me? So how do we do that? We read our word, right? We have to stay in the word. And that's one way that we fix our eyes on Jesus. We learn about him. And then another way is prayer, because he will talk to you. So we get in a relationship with Jesus. And that's how we fix our eyes on him. If you remember when you had your first boyfriend or girlfriend, you didn't see nobody else, right? That was the one. That's all you could think about. That's how we fix our eyes on Jesus. He's the one. He's the one that died for us. He's the one that gives us everything. He's the one that gave us life. So we have to make him number one priority, and then our eyes will be fixed on him because he's the most important, right? So we stay focused on Jesus, and he's designed and perfected our faith. He endured the cross, and he ignored the shame of that death because he focused on the joy that was set before him. He was focused on God through all of that, all of his suffering. He didn't look at all that was going on around him. So he gives us an example. And he's also the perfecter of our faith. So even more important than his example is his role in our life. He is available to strengthen us. He sustains us and perfects our faith. So he helps us on our race in life. And a big part of his example was in modeling the importance of drawing spiritual strength to God to run the race. He prayed. He studied. And we don't know a lot about him growing up and all of that, but there are times where the Bible talks about he was in the synagogue quoting scripture. So he studied the word. He knew the word, and of course he was the word, so he knew the word even better than we could. But he modeled that for us while he was here on this earth. He taught the word. He told the good news. But he spent time in prayer with God, alone with God, and that's how he helps us to know how we can run the race with endurance. Because he knew that God promised to help him do his will, right? He knew what he was here for. So he knew if I focus on God, if I have him as my number one priority, then he'll help me. And now he's available as our high priest to make the same promise and provide the same resources. Because this race is run by faith. It is run by prayerfully depending on Jesus' resources rather than just keeping a stiff upper lip and trying to do it on our own. We won't ever make it on our own. Ever make it on our own. So think about where, if you're having trouble running your race, think about where your mental focus is. Okay? So think about all the baggage. Is there something I need to let go or leave behind? And then think about your mental focus. And then we need to benefit, God will train us, and God is committed to helping us to run the race. And some of that's through discipline, but it's God's love for us. So we have to sometimes go through the painful stuff and know what the promise is, because God has promised us all a good end, right? I know the plans I have for you, Jeremiah 29:11. We all know that verse, right? So he has planned a good end for us, so we have to keep that in mind. So to run our race with endurance, we have to commune with God, number one. Hebrews 10:22 says, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. So if we're going to endure on the course that God has for us, we have to learn to personally lean on Jesus. And we do that through the Word. We do that through fellowship with one another, coming to church, being in a body that talks about the Word and talks about the good news and encourages one another. And we look ahead to what the promise is. And we learn to live by faith. In Hebrews 10:37, he talks about the prophet Habakkuk said, in a little while, only a little longer, the one who is coming will come without delay. But my righteous one must live by faith. For if he gives up his commitment, my soul will have no pleasure in him. So we're not to give up hope. We're not to, because if we give up hope, then we're lost. So this life is a lifelong marathon. We've got to commit ourselves to run to the very end. There's a million reasons that we can think of or that we can be told to give up and give in. But we have to run to the end. So, and how we do that is through a daily regimen of prayer, worship, reading the Word, and examining ourselves for the weights that are holding us back. So maybe as I've been talking about this, doing this lesson tonight, I want to encourage you to, if you haven't already, develop a regimen of daily Bible reading and prayer and worship, to do that. It don't have to be hours and hours. You don't have to pray for 3 hours and read the Bible for 2 hours and have a worship service in your home for an hour and a half. You don't have to do that. Just throughout your day, when you find yourself thinking all those old thoughts, when you find yourself having those thoughts coming into your mind that, man, this is not working out good, this is not ever going to work, I'm not good enough, whatever it is, turn your eyes to Jesus. Find you some Bible verses that you can memorize and think on those every day. Read those over and over. Our Sunday school classes for right now is talking about prayer. So come to Sunday school and learn about how to pray and how to get in a relationship with the Lord. And then we have to choose to do that every day. Remember, there's grace. So when we do mess up, because we do get in the weeds, and there's grace for that, God says, come on back, I'm here for you. So maybe you know how God has given you ways to endure, but you haven't used them. He's told you the truth so that you might run your race. We have learned the truth about the race that we have before us. So anybody have any questions, comments, anything you want to share about what we talked about running our race? All right. Well, if y'all need to get a white bracelet that says you're going to run your race today, we'll give you a white bracelet. If you want to change how you're running your race, sometimes we have to do that too, okay?